Today on Passion for Food, we're going to be making the most delicious vegetarian spaghetti sauce. Now, what makes it the most delicious, you might ask? Well, there is a secret ingredient that takes this from a regular marinara sauce to something special. And we'll talk about that and the history of it in just a moment, but let's go ahead and get started making our vegetarian spaghetti sauce. We want quite a large pot here, and to that we're going to add about 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And to get it started, we're going to want 2 large onions. It's always striking how much flavor that adds to any dish. Now, to that, I'm actually going to add 2 large carrots. Now, these aren't the most traditional addition, but I like to add the full French mirepoix. I think it really does improve the sauce. And I've been experimenting with a new slicing technique. I don't know, it needs a little work, but hey, it's still fun. It gets kind of difficult towards the end here. You definitely want to watch out for your fingers. Here we go. One more, and there we go. We can just throw those out or use them for stock or something. To that, we're also going to add 4 or 5 stalks of celery. Nothing fancy here, just a good old slap chop. We're also going to be adding a whole head of garlic, but I find it a little difficult to hand crush a whole head like this. So let me show you a little trick I like to use. You see, all we have to do to get the garlic to take its cloves off is to put it into a large, hard-sided container like this and just shake it. And I don't mean just kinda shake it, I mean really shake it. Shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it. The cloves should separate, and you'll go from kind of a hard clinking sound to a softer thudding sound. Once you hear that and you can actually smell garlic, your garlic should be peeled. This saves us about 10 minutes or so trying to peel that whole head of garlic, but it can make a little bit of a mess. That's why I like doing it over my sink like this. I left this in real time just so you can get some appreciation for it. I mean, you really want to shake the heck out of this. It looks a little ridiculous, but you know, for me, it saves enough time to make all the ridiculous shaking worth it. You see, check it out. We got a workout and we got peeled garlic. It's a win-win. And the other reason I like doing it over the sink is so I can use the water to help me separate out all those cloves from those annoying little paper skins that like to stick to everything. Alright, anyway, now that we have that situation garlicked, we can go ahead and add our whole head of garlic to the pot. And we're just going to saute this over medium-high heat. I actually consider the sautéing to be fairly optional, but it's so traditional I wanted to include it. But if you just wanted to throw everything into the pot and set it to simmer, I do believe that would work just as well. At this point, we can go ahead and season liberally with salt and pepper. We also want to add about 2 tablespoons of Italian seasoning. This is mostly just basil, rosemary, and thyme pre-combined for us. We'll just give that a quick mix for really no apparent reason at all. And now it's time to add the star of our show, the tomatoes. I'm going to be using 4 cans of stewed tomatoes here. And the reason I like to use stewed instead of fresh is that the fresh tomatoes in the grocery store are always picked when they're very underripe so that they can be shipped across country. And frankly, I think they taste like garbage. Whereas generally the tomatoes used in canning are picked at peak ripeness, so unless you're growing your own vine-ripened tomatoes, flavor-wise you're probably better off with canned over fresh. And I know we haven't put in our secret ingredient yet. Well, hang on, we're getting there. But before that, we want to add 2 or 3 cups of water, pretty much just enough water to cover most of our vegetables. Don't add too much though, because we're not adding any sort of thickening agent to this. The vegetables are going to be their own thickening agent. We'll just give that a quick mix to make sure all that seasoning is nicely distributed. And once this starts to come up to a simmer for us, we want to go ahead and cover it and let it simmer for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Now at this point we can see our veg is nicely cooked down, so it's finally time for our secret ingredient, MSG. And you know, I was going to go into this whole spiel and go through the research about how MSG is perfectly safe, but you know, looking into that I discovered that that is the mainstream consensus these days anyway. I mean, at this point we have over 50 years of scientific research indicating MSG is no more harmful for you than regular table salt. Not to mention the potentially racist origins of the myth that MSG was actually bad for your health. So instead of doing that, let's just take a quick moment and talk about the history of MSG. It was actually in 1908 when Professor Kikuwani Akita of the University of Tokyo first isolated monosodium glutamate using kombu, a common seaweed seasoning. Akita noted that glutamate had a distinctive taste, different from sweet, sour, bitter, and salty, and gave this new taste the name umami, which roughly translates to savory or meaty in English. The Japanese continued using kombu seaweed to extract MSG until 1956, when they discovered a method using fermentation similar to that of making yogurt, where specialized bacteria consume glucose, aka sugar, and then produce glutamic acid, finally allowing the cheap mass production of this deliciousness. And we really don't need much. I'm only going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of MSG to this entire pot of marinara sauce. And fun fact, one 1-ounce bottle of MSG in the early 1900s used to cost more than 10 pounds of flour. Now, we could serve this spaghetti sauce rustic style, but I really like mine smooth, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with one of these immersion blenders. These things are really fun. They're like mini boat motors for your kitchen. You could also use a blender or a food processor, but then you're trying to pour hot liquids, between different containers, and these things just make it a whole lot easier, and you'll be surprised by how quickly they work. Although if you do want to just serve this rustic, I would suggest cutting your carrots much finer when you first do it. If people find big chunks of carrot on their plate, they tend to be a little bit offended. Anyway, once that's a smoothness that we like, we want to go ahead and take this opportunity to taste for seasoning. One of the most common mistakes people make in the kitchen is under-seasoning their food. And this did need just another teaspoon or so of Italian seasoning and salt to really make it perfect. So we'll just get those seasonings mixed in there, and then we can go ahead if we want to and let this simmer a little more, but we don't really need to. This is ready to serve immediately. But I do have one final tip. When you're actually going to serve this, instead of just having the spaghetti on the plate and the sauce on top, what actually works quite a bit better is you cook your spaghetti and then you return it to the hot pot and you add your sauce on top of that. And we'll just mix that around with a fork or some tongs or whatever. The residual heat in here just helps the spaghetti absorb more of that sauce, and we'll avoid that dreaded watery plate situation when we serve our delicious vegetarian spaghetti. And you know me, I really love to serve mine with some shredded Parmesan cheese, but I suppose that's optional. I really love this vegetarian spaghetti sauce, and it's multi-purpose. It works as pizza sauce or dipping sauce on fish or whatever you would like to have it with. And a little homemade garlic toast would be right at home here too. Absolutely delicious. I love this. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little bell down below so you don't miss our future episodes. And check out one of our other awesome recipes playing on the screen now. This has been Graham with Passion for Food.